Good morning. Thank you for joining for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the life of Peter. And we're in Acts chapter 12 right now. And this is the last episode in the book of Acts that focuses solely on Peter, that makes him the main character. We talked about the fact that Luke pretty much divides the 28 chapters of the book of Acts between Peter and Paul. A little more Paul than there is Peter, but there are several chapters beginning with chapter 9 through chapter 15 where their stories interlock. And we're going to look at chapter 15 when Peter and Paul stand up together in Jerusalem to say the same thing and argue the same case. And we'll look at that next time. But here in chapter 12, Peter doesn't think he's probably going to make it to chapter 15 because he's been arrested and he's been marked for execution. We've talked about how Luke likes to show the parallel between the lives of Peter and Paul, the way Plutarch compared lives of ancient Greeks and ancient Romans. And we talked about how, the presentation of the gospel to Cornelius is later reflected in the presentation of the gospel to Agrippa. And then we have the incarceration of Peter in chapter 12, very much reflecting the incarceration of Paul in chapter 16, because both are released from prison by divine intervention. Anyway, let's read chapter 12, verses 1 through 17. And we will stop there. Although the story kind of has a postscript afterwards, we'll just mention that. But we're going to read verses 1 through 17 today. About that time, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them. Herod is Herod Agrippa, the first, the father of the Agrippa that we're going to meet later on. So there's that connection as well. Anyway, about that time, Herod, Agrippa the first, the king, laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them. And he had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. And when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. It was during the days of the feast of unleavened bread. And when he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after Passover to bring him out before the people. Peter was kept in the prison, and but prayer for him was being made fervently by the church of God. And on the very night when Herod was about to bring him forward, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and guards in the front of the door were watching over the prison. And behold, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared, and a light shone in the cell. And he struck Peter's side and roused him, saying, "Get up quickly." And his chains fell off his hands. And the angel said, "Gird yourself, put on your sandals." And he did so. And he said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." And he went out and continued to follow, and he did not know that what was being done by the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. And when they had passed the first and second guard, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which opened for them by itself. That happens every time you go into a store nowadays, but it didn't happen back then. Opened for them by itself, and they went out and went along one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. When Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I know for sure the Lord has sent forth his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting." And when he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was also called Mark, where many were gathered together and were praying. Mary, of course, is the sister of Barnabas, by the way. And when he knocked at the door of the gate, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. And when she recognized Peter's voice, because of her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter was standing in front of the gate. And they said to her, "Are you out of your mind?" But she kept insisting that it was so, and they kept saying, "It is his angel." But Peter continued knocking, And when they had opened and saw him, they were amazed. And motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had led him out of the prison. Then he said, "Report these things to James and the brethren." And he departed and went to another place. So anyway, um, so there's a kerfuffle because Peter's not there. Um, the guards are held to account and executed by Herod, and then Herod meets his demise quite ignominiously. The Lord gives him a worm that eats his innards from the inside out. This is a death that is confirmed in the histories, not only Josephus, but Roman history as well. And then we have Barnabas and Saul um, taking John Mark with them as they return from their mission to Jerusalem to go back to Antioch. So we have the interlocking of their stories. Now let's talk about this rescue in the few minutes that we have. So Herod Agrippa I, his children are already born and they're being raised in the home of Octavia, Augustus Caesar's sister, um, and or actually they're probably already grown. They were raised in the home of Octavia, Augustus, Augustus's sister. Anyway, he has titular control of Judea. But of course, Romans have actual control. He has his own guard and his own few troops. Of course, the temple has its own guard as well. Anyway, Herod has seized John's brother James, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, taken James and has executed him, and that made the Jews happy. And so he's trying to himself to live in two worlds between the Romans and the Jews, trying to keep peace so that there can be no disruption of taxation, which what the Romans expect out of him. So if he can do the Jews a solid, he's going to do that. And so then he seizes Peter. And that's even better. They love that he seized Peter. And he's going to wait till after Passover to bring him out. There's a connection with Peter's death too. Jesus was crucified at Passover, and Peter was eventually crucified, but in Rome by the Romans. But here he's being held till after Passover. Um, but on the eve of this, when he's chained up between two guards, and he's got a chain on each hand, and he's got a guard on either side, he's snoozing so soundly that the light doesn't wake him up. It would have woken me up. Didn't wake him up, man. That bright light did not. That's how soundly he was sleeping. The angel has to smite him on his thigh. It kind of reminds you of Jacob, wrestling with the angel or with God or whomever he wrestled with, and God strikes his thigh socket and ruins it for the rest of his life, and it kind of reminds you of that Jabbok moment, that confrontation with God, and he says, you know, gird yourself, put your robe on, gird it up, put your shoes on, put your sandals on, and follow me. And the doors open for them without them touching the doors. And then Peter ends up out on the street and he thinks he's having a dream or a vision. And then he thought, whoa, this is real. So he goes to Mary's house, which he knows the brethren are collected at so that they can be praying for him. He knows this. Mary is important. John Mark is going to be important. John Mark is going to be important to Peter himself. He's going to be part of Peter's staff right before Peter dies. And we'll talk about that later. And Barnabas, of course, is important, and is important to Peter as well as important to Paul. And anyway, he goes to that house, and there's humor in all this story. There's the there's the there's the the fact that the angel has to shake him to wake him up, to hit him hard to get him to wake up. There's the realization. Oh, wait a minute, this is real. And then he keeps on knocking. He knocks and she opens and she leaves. Closes the door in his face, or doesn't open the door for him, I should say, after recognizing his voice. And he has to keep knocking knocking, 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 and they're talking, knocking, knocking, knocking. And finally, they open the door. There's humor in this that kind of undercuts the menace of it. That lets us reminds us that God is in control of everything. And then there's the fact that he says, "I'm going to go someplace else. This is what happened to me. Go tell James." Which James? Not James, the brother of John, not James, the son of Alphaeus, James, the brother of Jesus, who was already an elder and a figure of great influence in the city of Jerusalem. Paul says, "Go tell this to James." And so they do. I want us to notice, and I've already taken nearly 11 minutes. This may turn out to be the longest 5 good minutes in the 5-year history of this event. But I need us to notice the calm. It's the calm. Pete, we have this event which is it's about death. His life is about to end. But then again, when Jesus called him the second time, he told him that he was going to die. You're going to die for me. If you follow me, you're going to die for me. That's going to happen. Those are the facts. So follow me. And Peter followed him anyway. And Peter fully expects to die for the cause of Jesus Christ. And so he's in no way surprised to be facing the death penalty on this night. And he's able to sleep so soundly that the angel has to hit him in the thigh to wake him up. I just love that detail. And I love that detail about Peter. It just tells us so much about him. Well, he's not through learning things, but we get to see him on the right side of things. Next time we're together, we'll be in chapter 15. But we'll end here today now that I've gone to 12 minutes. Thank you for joining me for another 5+ good minutes with the Word.